And now, guys, for our final section, tier lists. Up-to-date versions of the 1v1 and 2v2 pre-made tier lists. I'm going to be doing these here, and there we go. All right, so you should be seeing that available now. Guys, I shared the link to the tier maker profile, and I will be sure to share that in the description of this video if you guys want to make your own tier list, get that discussion going. So why don't we go ahead and get started with the 1v1 tier list. Palm, since you're our 1v1 specialist for this video, why don't you go ahead and take the lead on this?
Yeah, sure, I'll do my best and try to consider everything while doing this. So, masters, we need to set the place to describe how we want to list these, where the value from each master comes from. It's quite simple. You have their auto attack, that's a consideration while making your deck. You've got their perks. Shit, sorry, this is bad.
Go for it. Go for it.
Go for it. I mean, it doesn't
Alright,
have to be exactly a masterclass, but you know, free reign for it.
Palm
Alright,
can easily put a masterclass here. Go.
When making the choice to pick a master, you sort of build your deck around what you want to achieve and what your win condition will be. Most of the time, it's about achieving perks, making the most out of them. You've got the 4 stages. You've got perk 1, perk 2, perk 3, and Mana Frenzy, of course. Since the current meta is mostly about control at the moment, it's very hard to be aggressive and win so fast. It's mostly about getting your advantage from... Oh, sorry. I don't...
Yeah, honestly, the point that you bring up about control being like relatively predominant is kind of interesting because my experience was that as soon as they did the mana generation changes and all that, the meta actually just started getting really, really aggressive, and control decks for the most part just kind of fell by the wayside. I guess, once the spell changes settled in, Sniper sort of came to the forefront of the meta a little bit more. I can see how that's sort of like two interacting forces that are struggling against each other.
So yeah, I think I'd have an easier time describing what I want to bring up by actually presenting the masters and how I feel about them.
Yeah,
because each master has their own perk where they shine. Some of them shine at like perk 1 and 2. Some of them are 1 and 3. Some of them have a very strong 3, and the 1 and 2 are useless.
So you're focusing like on their power spikes mostly.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what defines them as a good master. So let's start with that. Let's get onto the tier list. I would list as an S rank masters that are almost always good, extremely easy to get value from in with most decks. At the moment, since it's mostly cycle centered, I would list Apep and Velourian. Apep because he gets, of course, 2 mana value from perk 1, 4 mana value from perk 3. At the moment, with a very fast cycle deck, you can pretty much overwhelm enemies during perk 3, while also ensuring you get Mana Frenzy by like 40 XP advantage. Valerian himself continues to be good. Both of these guys have very reliable auto attacks also. Valerian's pretty good. Perk 1 is pretty lackluster, but it allows you to trade evenly. Well, allows you to win trades, even trades, since you get that one slight heal.
Yeah, just to confirm, perk 1 is the passive heal ability, right?
Yeah.
Just, keep everybody on the same page.
Yeah, of course. Good point. But Valerian starts getting most of his value at perk 2, where he gets his spells that makes him attack 5 times in a large area. This spell is what allows him to truly be oppressive during that mid-game section and allows him to reach perk 3. Now, he becomes even stronger. So that's the master that barely has any downside throughout the game, where you don't have like a large portion of the game where you feel like you're not getting any power spike, which we can see later, for example, on Wrecked. So Valerian at perk 3, that's when his auto attack starts hurting like hell, so he can easily defend. It boosts his healing, so he wants to take chip damage to heal it back up on a lot of units. And his spell, which costs only 1 mana per cycle, becomes devastating.
Yeah, he doesn't mind getting down and dirty in the later parts of the game, and benefits from it a lot more than other masters that just have to sort of like make do with whatever survives after they try to win trades.
Yep, you really outlast. You really have your minions outlast fights over after fights, allowing you to build more and more of an army.
Yeah, it's just value that sort of compounds on itself, because since it's a passive and it never really stops working. It's sort of like similar to how we were saying Azali has infinite value. Velourian's passive heal does kind of go in that direction, where sky is the limit. I actually did like my own like mock-up versions of tier lists, like just on my own. I had Velourian down at A just because that passive healing actually got recently nerfed. Going a little further ahead, I had him as the sole A tier, like sort of in a category of his own. I did have APEP in S. I definitely agree that with the changes to mana generation, cycling is extremely powerful, and nobody does it better than APEP, that just has it like automatically built into his kit with absolutely zero cost in mana. Like, it's just value generation at absolutely no cost. Like, I am glad that it shifted back towards his cycling, and it's a lot less about his shield totem now. Like the shield totem, the duration and the AP and the HP on the shield totem getting nerfed, definitely extremely necessary, and it's a lot more about just cycling and just getting repeated amounts of value from his perks, and being able to like always have the card you need ready to go and available for the situations that may arise.
Also, the fact that they removed the totem from his cycle, it now appears every X amount of time. That means
I forgot
before
about that,
before this, I would use the totem almost any time because it's 0, so you want to keep your cycle going. But now you need to be way more mindful about when you use it. Sometimes you use it as a shield in front line. Sometimes you use it to, of course, use its defense. All right, going to
definitely noticed that. Just last remark, I definitely noticed that a lot in the playlist you put out. Definitely going to be sure to shout out. You put out the APEP guide for First Contender. You showed your deck, and you had a playlist for it. I did notice that you did tend to use the shield totem to block for your minions more than to block damage on your master tower, which is like the straightforward use of it. You want to maybe comment like a little bit on that?
Well, it's like a free wall, and most of the fight throughout the game, you can observe where the fight happens, and if it's near your tower, near their tower, near the center of the map, on either side of the bridges, and most of the time, during the entire fight, during the entire match, all of the fights happen around the center of the map, the bridges. So it's kind of pointless to waste time. Time is a resource. To waste time waiting for the units to reach your master when you can simply use the totem, which is free, as a wall, which takes a few hits and allows your range unit to do work.
Yeah, it also puts the totem into your deck back quicker, because if you have the totem and hold it, like, those 30 seconds don't count until you play it, right?
Yeah, plus if it's the cheapest card in your hand, you can get back to another cheaper card, which allows you to cycle faster. Instead of using, for example, a 4-mana card, you get that 0-mana card.
Yeah, definitely an interesting consideration and some good insight. Fogo, would you agree with these two S tier picks?
I think it makes clear sense. You've both explained it. I do think the only key aspect I would note is how, while these masters are S right now, they are not the S or S plus they were before. I think in terms of the recent changes, they were clearly in a good direction. and they are not the oppressive type of master they used to be before, which I think is something very good.
The strongest by a smaller margin, which is always something you'd like to see. To sort of like center the balance of power more towards like A or B tiers. All right, so what would we have for A tier? Well,
I put Kingpuff, Volco, and Setsu. Now, Kingpuff is more of the same kind of deck that you would use in the previous patches, not in this very cycle-heavy patch. Kingpuff is more about those, of course, 4-mana units and such. Legionnaires even still, Scotty. The general strong 4 to 6 mana cards. You get your value from the Rage, the very powerful stun he does at perk 1, the Rage and Shield at perk 2, and finally the spawns that he gets at perk 3. So all 3 of his perks are pretty powerful, especially his perk 1.
Yeah, for those who are not aware, between the last tier list that we did, which was in March, and now, Kingpuff has actually been completely reworked. His perks are now, his Rage and Shields aren't just passively put on 4 or 5 cost minions. They actually designate areas on the screen where you place minions, and you get up to 5 of those effect, 5 enraged minions, 5 shielded minions. And his swap is now a little bit more cycle dependent, works a little bit differently. It's on a timer that you can manipulate depending on the cards that you play and cycle into. And his perk 3, his bridge shield, was completely eliminated and replaced with when you swap your minions from one bridge to the other, the place where the minions started actually gets populated by these little night buffs that are basically free units. So just a quick primer, and honestly interesting to see you put him up here because I haven't really had much experience with the master at all. Like, I was really interested in playing him when he first got reworked and he came out. You know, he was the new toy and everything, so he was a lot of fun, but I never really got too much of an indication of his power. So you're basing that A tier decision mostly on the fact that like every perk seems to do something useful.
Indeed, he's one of the most skill requiring master at the moment.
I am so
I would
glad
like
for
to
that.
add one final note.
Mm-hmm.
So previously, his bridge swap used to be on a cycle, and now it's based on your mana usage. So previously, he had a kind of disconnect where you wanted to cycle fast, but you also wanted higher cost, medium cost units. But now he benefits, no matter what, from his medium units.
Yeah,
He's not cycle dependent anymore.
It's interesting because it's timing / cycle based, right? Like, it has a base timer that you can manipulate by cycling, which is interesting.
I think it's like Pom went to the key aspect, which I think it's mana usage. Like, you can be cycling and not be cycling any 4 to 6 mana cost, so you're not affecting Kingpuff's perk. So that's why I think saying mana usage is really much more appropriate, since the timer is only decreased when you play a card that costs from 4 to 6. Hence mana usage, and not really cycle, because you can cycle the whole deck without playing a single card of these costs, and then you have 0 impact on Kingpuff first perk.
Yeah, I was just placing maybe a little bit more emphasis than needed to be placed on the fact that, like, it's like a mixture between timing and cycle, like from a conceptual point of view, which is honestly a really interesting design choice. Like, I would not hesitate to say that before his rework, Kingpuff was among the lowest, if not just the straight up lowest skill ceiling master in the game. And seeing him rise absolutely to the top of those standings is just so awesome to see.
Agreed. I enjoy these changes.
Okay, so anything as far as Volco and Setsu that you want to remark on?
Volco is mostly the same as always. Very strong benefits from cycling with the burn the bridges. His perk 1 is his best one. Perk 2 starts helping with the rage. Perk 3, not very impactful, however. And then finally,
Yeah, so unimpactful that I can't think of it off the top of my head. Okay, his rage increases in power, right?
Berserker Rage for the melee units. Yeah, so it being a perk 3 is not as impactful as some of the other masters that are way up there.
Yeah, interesting that his air vulnerability doesn't seem to affect him that much. That as we've commented before, the game is so ground based now that it doesn't really seem like that much of a weakness to him. Like personally, I would have put him like a lot lower, but yeah, I can see
can
how
see that.
how metagame tendencies have sort of favored him and just strayed away from his weaknesses. Like the fact that air units don't capture bridges means that your bridge burn kills basically everything now. Like your opponent does not have very many things that are not exposed to bridge burn in one way or another. So yeah, interesting to remark on that. You were gonna say something about Setsu, I believe.
Yeah, the third master I had in this tier was Setsu. Exactly the same reason as always. Straight from perk 1, she starts getting that jump onto the field, which costs only 2 mana, 50 damage on landing, and gives you a 300 mana unit with pretty damn good damage and range. So every cycle she gets that jump, good presence on the field. Her perk 2 is not that powerful. Being able to reload is kind of helps, but not that much unless you're going for face damage.
It got considerably weaker with the changes to spells, honestly. Like
That too,
her
that's
and Miloween specifically, they definitely suffered from that particular aspect because suddenly there's not that many spells that are useful to have in your deck for starters, and most of them got mana nerfs, which means they're harder to cycle.
Yeah, you still want to stick to those 2 mana cost cards. However, her perk 3 is extremely strong. You can either go for face to finish off or have a very strong potent unit on the field with a piercing stunning shot, which is great.
Yeah, even on defense, like if Setsu gets to perk 3 too soon, she almost feels like unassailable in a way. Like her defense just becomes the absolute best in the game with a strong enough cycle.
Yeah.
And also, like something I'd like to remark with Setsu, and this could also probably apply to KT or 3KT, the new master that we are just now adding to the tier list, but they're good at eliminating like safe spaces on the map. Like one of the big things about Blast Entry is it goes anywhere. You can claim a bridge with it. You can reinforce an offensive push. You can attack a minion that you can't hit from straight from the tower. You jump onto that and prioritize removing that minion. And
you can put it in your field to begin a push.
Yeah, and the pockets, especially the pockets that are just so incredibly predominant now that minion interactions are really, really central to the game. Like being able to attack the pockets and just eliminate safe spaces for your opponent on the map is definitely something that gives you so much more control over the flow of a match. Like if it's not going to be just the generic thing of, I push, you pocket things that kill my push out with those, I pocket things that kill that, and just back and forth. She sort of like breaks the mold in a lot of ways and creates just more situations, not only for skill expression, but just looking at the game from different perspectives.
Yep, well said.
Anything else you guys want to add before we go to B tier?
Nope.
Okay. So, B tier.
As for B, I wasn't too sure. These are the medium heroes, which are pretty much in the center of the power scale. I put the Ravager, Stormbringer, Miloween, and Dionna.
Okay. I do remember having Miloween and Dionna on B tier for mine. Ravager and Stormbringer, they were either low B or C. But yeah, go ahead if you want to share your thoughts on this part.
So Dionna, first of all, I'll start with her. She, of course, benefits from the cycling She's a great at control. Her auto attack is pretty good. Her perk 1 with the traps helps with your minions on the field. They can't capture bridges anymore, however, so you need to assist your minions with them. She's good with medium cost units like Scott, the Dragon Whelps, which got nerfs. I'm not really.
Yeah, I always tend to favor one or two mid-range DPS units with her. Like just top of the chart DPS, like Scotty and Flightless Dragons, because with her decoy trap, you usually can not only guarantee their safety, but just give them so much more uptime on their incredibly high damage.
Yeah, and then her perk 2, that's where she shines. She starts getting those XP and mana bonuses. So that's something that the player needs to consider and aim to gather as many as possible. Perk 3, not that strong, but still helps control the field.
Just a little bit more of a spike in value.
Then Miloween, she remains pretty neutral, very consistent master. Good perk 1, good perk 2, good perk 1, which is her mana golem. It's a decent unit on its own. Then you got perk 2, which is a 0 mana cost spell, which is pretty strong, 150 damage. That means she benefits from cycling. And then at perk 3, her mana golem becomes a very powerful unit, hard to deal with.
Yeah. I will say that now that the spell changes have been put into effect, masters like Velourian, Volco, and Miloween, who have that piece of removal incorporated into their kits, suddenly that value goes exponentially higher because the value of spells that you actually put in your deck in comparison is even more weak by comparison. Like Arcane Missiles, it's 150 damage, right, for 0?
Yep.
Bridge Burn
in multiple hits, which is good in itself.
Yeah, Bridge Burn is 200 AoE multi-hits. And Searing Light, I'm not sure the base numbers on that. Would you happen to know those?
It's 5 times his attack, so I think his attack is 35 now, or 40. Plus however much per Empyrean card. So it's 5 times that.
Yeah, I just know that most of the time it kills a Harbinger. That's what I really use to measure that output.
Or now that has that Empyrean buff, but it's still very strong.
Yeah, they did change that, how that Empyrean buff worked to his attacks, right?
Yeah, it's a bit lower now. Moving on to Ravager. I put him here because mostly he's the best at doing that one early push. His Frenzy helps mostly on, I see a lot of Amun on Ravager, putting a big unit on the floor,
Very
like
common.
a tank, a Scrat tank or something like that, and then Amun right behind, very hard to deal with. And then you got the Frenzy, which stays on him after the first sacrifice. So yeah, you mostly want to build those slightly beefy, high DPS units that benefit from Frenzy. His perk 3 helps you oppress if you, at that moment it's good, but it's pretty hard to time it.
Yeah. Yeah, Ravager I've always described, like whenever I'm streaming or using him, it really feels like you want minions with good HP to DPS ratios. Like beefy minions with high DPS, because that just means that not only like centering around his perk 2 that gives Frenzy below haste in this case, now that it's been renamed. Yeah. But it gives it below the, what was it? They reworked it, right? So it was 75 or 65? No. Used to be 50. Okay, yeah. Point being that the more HP your minions have, the longer they're going to have that buff, and the more DPS they have, the more they're going to be able to do with that buff. So if you combine good HP and DPS values, it's just the combination, the sort of sweet spot combination that Ravager looks for in a lot of minions. Things like Crystal Sentry,
Incubus, Succubus, Amun.
Even in 1-1 trades, like if in the middle of the trade your unit gets Frenzy, it's going to attack faster, so now they're not going to kill each other. Your unit's going to leave, and that might just give you the bridge.
Yeah.
Just an extra aspect of control. By the way, Palm, are you saying these in any particular order, or are the tiers just supposed to be considered equal?
It's hard to judge, to adjust them within the tier.
Yeah, so for now, consider every master on each tier as equal status.
Yeah, it all varies a little bit. It's a bit of a vague ranking.
Okay.
Only Stormbringer. Stormbringer is kind of the same as on Ravager. You want a deck built around him. It's a completely passive master. First perk doesn't do much, but it's a bit of an annoyance. He shines mostly on perk 2 with the marksmanship, which allows all of his ranged units to be considerably more threatening. It's very hard to reach them when you have a lot of drone buzzers, drone walkers all over the place, which are very hard to reach.
Yeah,
and finally, at his perk 3, it's considerable. It helps with the pressure, and while you're being Stormbringer's opponent, you need to have a very sturdy army ready to be built to deal with that, or else you get overwhelmed by the DPS from marksmanship and his.
Yeah, just like the perk 2 power spike is definitely that, just like his influence around the map. Like basically, you consider every one of his units like to have a radius of influence, and giving +2 range, just to conceptualize it. Like for most minions, that is 25% or more extra range. Like 8, 7, 6 is around the average range values, I would say. So that's 25+% on the sphere of influence of every minion that he plays. Well, not everyone. Obviously, his melee minions aren't affected, but like that's just a much higher degree of control. And about the perk 3, like it does get to a point where you literally play your minions just so that those shots don't go face. Because if you play too passively, all that extra damage from the double attack speed is going to go to your face, and it's going to add up and wear you down over time, and really like put you into situations where you're a lot more pressured to make decisions.
Yeah, when he hits perk 3, you want to pace it. It becomes a game of patience with yourself. Do I want to absorb shots with my face and build an actual minion push, or do I defend my face? Very often when I fight the Stormbringer, I'll allow myself to take a lot of damage, only to be able to deal with the minions with marksmanship.
Yeah, but it's always that dance, and you always have to choose between one or the other, which is kind of where he like makes you uncomfortable, like consistently.
Exactly.
And that's always going to work in his favor. Personally, I will say that I do, like, I preach this whole use your health as a resource a lot, but I will admit that sometimes I kind of overdo it and do take too much damage instead of tanking with minions a little bit earlier once things get complicated. Fogo, any input on these B tier masters that you'd want to?
I think they go over most of it. I mean, Pome clarified all those aspects. I don't think there's anything to add up.
Okay.
All right.
So C tier.
C tier, I would have Ratbo at a high C tier, Morelia and Wrecked.
Okay. KT considerably low. Like, I had him very, very high ranked, if I'm being honest, because of that same logic of like Setsu, where you eliminate a lot of safe spaces on the map. Like if you're doing the push with his clones and people pocket things, as long as you have like that one extra clone to summon, if you summon it on the very edge of the map, he does target the pocket. So
yeah, that's true.
I really feel like that's like especially especially as in the high cycle metagames that we're now in, like being able to do like those back-breaking tempo swings as consistently as he does, it really feels like it contributes to generating advantages that you can't really calculate like with numbers. You know, like sometimes you'll be willing to take like negative trades as far as mana, you know, spending more mana than your opponent commits, just because it gives you that just like long amount of uptime on the units that you already have in play. Like squeezing extra value that you can't really measure by like such, you know, tangible metrics as like mana or experience.
I mean, I think it's also important to keep in mind what a meta means, like having a meta. And for the current meta, yes, cycling is a thing and it's prioritized, but there are too many answers, too many masters and minions that are currently strong that can answer the extra pressure caused by wrecked clones. Because wrecked perks are on two things: the pressure of the extra clones and its pressure in terms of field and bridges, and then the pressure from having a third perk that might remove a high priority unit. And the third perk, I think it's too late for that pressure to be super significant. And the other ones, if most of the meta cards can deal with it, he will be generally weaker. That's why I do think a C, probably a high C, like a high C or a low B makes sense for Rex right now.
Yeah, good points.
Especially with Volco.
So-
Volco on the bridge just.
His presence on the field is definitely pretty powerful at perk 1 and 2. However, as Fogo said, the clones and the real wrecked, of course, are not that hard to deal with anymore. I feel like the current lower cost, I don't know, warrior, elite swarmer, they all kill him. His range DPS is not that powerful, and it's quite hard to consistently get your shadow dance in the other master's field and get value from the teleports. But the main reason I put him as C tier is that even though he gets a crazy advantage on the bridge control from early game, once he reaches perk 3, I've never felt this to be a considerable power spike. I feel like it's extremely lackluster, and at that point in the game where there's a lot of minions all over the place, and that one attack that you can do to a single minion, plus it's hard to aim, it has to be timed, you need to be on the field, able to target it. There are too many factors for it to be impactful. And I feel like Wrecked is a race to reach Mana Frenzy from 60 XP to 200 XP with barely any change in the gameplay.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so that leaves Mordar for D tier, right?
Well, I'll cover Radbo and Morelia real quick.
Oh yeah, that too.
Radbo gets the free scrat, but with the constant control of everyone having decent units able to capture both bridges, that one scrat barely makes any difference. Daka is pretty strong, but it's counterable by placing a unit in front. It's mostly used as defense, and spells that are defensive inherently don't have that much value because being defensive, you've already conceded the control of the bridge. His final perk is decent, getting a lot of constant bridge grabs. As for Morelia, her first and second perk, getting the skeletons mostly is good for bridge grab. They're not that impactful. Spirit has been nerfed, so it's
Very
not that
heavily.
great anymore. Her siphoning spell is strong. Reducing cost of spells is decent, but people don't use that many costly spells anymore. Her dragon has been nerfed, and you rarely ever have ascension at that time, so the breath is pretty weak now.
Yeah, her
Dragon itself isn't that hard to deal with.
Yeah, her 1v1 prowess has definitely suffered a considerable amount. There was, you said, the spirit nerf,
I
the
think
Queen's Dragon.
Like all the things they did to Morelia, like in the beginning, like the book was reverted to the original timer of 25 seconds instead of 30, but the skeletons remain the same. Now that spirit, like before, the thing of spirit is that as it was consistent, you could any unit would you know what value to get from using spirit on it. So Morelia could be used on lots of different decks. Right now, it's not the same. Now you want like that sweet spot of medium to high health to healthy units. So getting a spirit on your skeletons even might not be something significant. And yeah, I think what saddens me the most about Morelia is that the third perk is a Nervure and a Breath. That is awesome, yes. But in the last patch, Breath was heavily nerfed. So at that point, that already affects Morelia's third perk. I kind of failed to understand why was there a need to further increase the cost of Dragon to 9 mana. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that was
There's a
the
lot of
highest one.
complaints from the, I'd say, lower ranks where they feel like the dragon has been very hard to deal with ever since her release. Maybe that's something that the devs have considered when nerfing the dragon's
yeah.
presence.
They did say, and this felt really like 2v2 focused. They did say that since spells were nerfed and she reduced the cost of spells, like she was prospering in that patch before they did the changes to the Queen's Dragon. It just seems like a weird sort of like distribution
The
of her
answer does not
power.
seem the most adequate one, and it's like I would say Morelia along with the Kingpuff and Dionna are like Kingpuff and Morelia I think more of the highest skill cap masters in the sense that what you can do with their perks, it's a lot. It's really a lot. Like when you open the book, you have 4 options, so you need to be able to very quickly and read the board and know what's the best option. Kingpuff something similar. You need to know when to swap. You need to see the timer of the next one so you can maybe even do double swap for more value. Also, what buff do you want on what character? And that is also considering placement. So I think these two are definitely the ones that for beginning players are probably the hardest to learn because
And
it
Diona,
requires
like you said.
Yeah,
it requires
ironically enough, that is true. But you see Morelia so much because Big Dragon good. But honestly,
and
like
because you can just do
honestly,
skeletons with her. You
yeah,
just do skeletons with her. Lots of players just know skeletons.
yeah, the average player will squander a very high amount of potential. You usually see the average player only use one ability consistently. There's the people that always skeleton, and there's the people that always heal. And that's for the most part basically it. Like I'd say the spell discount is the least common one, and now that Spirit got nerfed, its use definitely should be going down a lot. Which is it's kind of sad in a weird way because Spirit was like probably the stronger perk 1 buff. Like, yeah, using the skeletons for early bridge grabs was always great because, cycle is a lot slower in the early game, so getting extra bridge grabs is a lot more powerful then. But yeah, it feels like she's just taken a crippling series of hits in the last couple of patches to where her power just isn't what it used to be, especially in 1v1 where her spell discounts that tend to be like her most powerful option just really don't have the same amount of relevance.
Yeah, I mean, we could have an entire discussion about the spirit change,
For sure.
everything about it, or the spell changes.
Mm-hmm.
But that leaves us with Mordar as the only D tier here, at least for 1v1.
Back to the
Earliest time in
bottom, old
2v2.
Mord.
So Mordar, the big reason is that he can. It's very hard for him to get any value from his resurrections anymore. There's just no real situation where you get very interesting results from it. His first and second perk are that resurrection, but that locks you into a sort of very extremely limited minion choices where it's actually potent to use the gravestones.
Yeah, like you almost exclusively want like single minion summons, because if not, that'll just dilute the quality of your resurrections, and then that
Yeah,
like he's
those units need to have a lot of qualities. Like they need
very
some
pigeonholed.
innate abilities such as being a stout heart or Jolo with his dodge ability. They're very things like that. Of course, before the spirit change, we had a ton of Mordar players abusing spirits on snipers and all that. That was pretty annoying.
Ghost turret was very common back then because
Exactly.
it was
Very
something
annoying.
cheap that didn't go into your res pool. So it gave
Yeah.
you a lot of control and powered up the stronger minions that you wanted to play.
So right now, I put him as the lowest because of how extremely specialized as a master he is. You see that the higher rank are generalists and the lower ranks are more specialists. I've had a bit of success with Mordar exploiting only using 5 to 7 mana cost units and trying to get those huge death balls going, but it's not that great.
Yeah, he's just very pigeonholed. We've talked several times during the course of these videos about how the card pool is narrowing down, because of spells, because of air units, and like the card pool is already like narrowed down to a certain extent where like 10, 20, 30% of the cards just don't really have that many uses. And for Mordar, it's an even smaller pool because of the restrictions to, you don't want multi-minion summons, you don't want things that don't have like extra added value abilities. You're not that interested in too many buildings. So yeah, just his pool of useful cards just probably really is the narrowest of all the masters, and that just like narrows down his options. And not only that, but it makes his play patterns predictable so that they're easier for other players to learn how to counter them.
And finally, his auto attack is one of the worst.
Terrible.
It only works against Scrats, but that's about it.
I'd honestly say it only works against stealth units and shields. Like, not even actual minions, just like revealing stealth and popping shields.
It's not horrible, but it's hard to... You can't rely on his auto attack as a source to deal with minions.
Yeah, especially in the early game, he needs to be babied a lot by his minions to not take like excessive amounts of chip damage.
So yeah, he's mostly a very specialized master.
Okay, so I believe that's going to be printed. So masters, it is September 2021 1v1 tier list. We'll save it. Minion Masters, September 2021, 1v1. I will download the image, and that will be available on my Discord. I'll add the link to the description so that you guys can honestly, comment on it. Take a look at it in the comments below on Discord. Feel free to share your own ideas. This template is readily available for you guys. I'll share that as well so that anybody who's watching this can go ahead and make their own. And so now we'll do another one for 2v2 pre-mades. Mr. Fogo, floor is yours.
Yes, so I think before going into the masters, I think the important aspects to consider between the difference of 1v1 and 2v2 are that in 2v2 you have more players playing, right? That's the base. What does this imply? More things going on, more minions on the field, more masters attacking. I would say that's about it. How will this impact and affect, for example, the classifications of masters in changes for 1v1? Masters that are usually weak in 1v1 because their basic attack is weaker or they have clear weaknesses, that might turn into a weapon, or at least might not be such a weakness in 2v2 because the teammate's master can help. That
was one of the most interesting things that Palm pointed out, like categorizing the master's auto attack as a reason that they're good or not. In 1v1, that definitely has some heavy implications because that means the master is more capable of defending its own tower, and you don't have to dedicate resources to it that often. In 2v2, it really doesn't tend to matter that much, especially when there's two masters, doing the exact same thing. But just also the fact that minions rarely get to your master tower that easily because of all the interactions that are happening. So interesting thing to note.
in a meta where minions really are the focus, how masters deal with them, it's a really core point. So going on into the now into the masters, S tier, I would put Volco.
Absolutely.
Reason number one, we are in a meta where flying is not played that often. You don't see as many flying units. So Volco's weakness of not targeting flying barely exists. Some decks do focus on it, and some combos can heavily rely on it, but those are combos that counter Volco, and in general Volco is strong because you see less flying. Then, as I was mentioning, there are more units on the field, so burn will give you more value because it will probably be hitting more units. The rage, the embers of second and third perk are much huge. This barely makes any sense in English, but basically just because the embers can also give the buff to your teammates' units. So you
With
can
no
buff
limit.
with no limit. So you can buff much more units. And then at third perk, that Berserker's Rage will really give you a huge advantage by fighting on the bridge. And when you're fighting on the bridge, a fight that you will probably win because your units have Rage and your opponent's ones don't, not to mention you can also support with a burn. The reason why that's even more advantageous is because when you're on the bridge, you are denying experience to your opponent. You're not getting it, but so's not him. And the fight ends, you get the bridge, you get the experience. Volco is just phenomenal right now in 2v2.
Yeah,
Like, especially, Pom mentioned that control is very much played right now, and in that sense, fighting on the bridge is what you want to do as control. Volco is just the go-to when you are playing a control combo if you want to have an advantage.
Yeah, I'd say he's almost criminally overpowered in that sense. Especially, like, I feel that, like, people's win rates just spike so hard when they're playing this master. Again, the emphasis that's been placed on hordes, like, so many Volcos, you see them win games by just literally plopping a skeleton horde on the rage bridge, and that's the end of it. The value just absolutely spirals out of control. Like, if you want to throw Azali and all the other things we commented into that mix, like, it just compounds on itself in a way that's just so, it feels almost automatic in a way, where his value is just undeniable at this point. Like, especially with bridges being like so much more important to access your opponent's side of the field now that air units just don't see that much play. It just feels like his control over the map is just something that's incredibly undeniable and incredibly powerful.
Yep. Moving on to A tier, I would place Setsu and Mordar. And I really find it interesting how Mordar goes from D to A. I would say mainly the key aspects that Pom pointed out as being Mordar weaknesses can really be compensated by having a teammate. You can play decks that rely much more on heavy units because your teammate can protect your tombstones and your teammate can focusing on grabbing the bridges. If you are playing a control deck, a control combo, you might be a little bit behind because of how you guys said Mordar needs to be babied in the beginning. But then at the late game, even if somehow your opponents get mana frenzy a few seconds before, usually that's really bad. But as Mordar, with your attack just damaging everything, all small units your opponents are playing on the bridge just for a little bit extra pressure, they get on your side, they disappear, because at that point, if they are spamming the bridges, they have constant units on your side. So Mordar is just attacking, huge DPS on everything. It's really huge.
He winds up pretty well once it's that many units.
And then again, we are in a season where we see spells play less often. So all these shock rocks, chains, all these stun spells, you see less of them. In 2v2 you might see one or two, but still you see less. So there's less chance for your tombstones to be denied with a stun, and even if they are, they might just be charged up again to still give another res if you manage to play well with that. So I think Mordar is really good right now if, like I was saying, if your teammate is playing something for that. This is all about the strength of each master. If you are playing Mordar and you are only playing units that cost 1 or 2 mana, then you are probably not going to see an A tier performance. But if you are playing decks that make up of Mordar strength the most, and your teammate is playing something that goes on with that, then for sure it's going to be A tier. And as I was saying, spells were nerfed. So why is Setsu a master that relies heavily on spells on A tier? Well, I would say mainly it's because the spells that remain strong are cheap spells that you can use for quick reloads on Setsu. If your Pincer is very strong, Bridge Buddies is very good just for some bridge pressure and cheap reloads. Shock Rock, as I was mentioning before, for Mordars, and just overall a utility on for 2 mana. And diverse other spells like Sunburn and even Frost Feathers that you can use just to reload Setsu. And if you consider the impact that a third perk Piercing Shot has, that's definitely worth paying 2 mana for. So just Setsu is in a really good spot. And then it can go into aggressive, it can go into defense, into control. You can jump on bridges, jump on your side, jump on pocket, jump on your opponent's master tower. You can do all of that with Setsu. So it's really super diverse, and you can play around all those weaknesses. That's why I think Setsu is in a really very good spot.
Interesting,
yeah.
the part about Mordar, like talking about how he can sort of be like a type of role player. Like I always rag on new players' conceptualization of how 2v2 works, because all too often I hear this concept of, okay, so you attack and I defend, and that always drives me crazy because that's not really a feasible way of looking at the game. Like if only one person is attacking and only one person is defending, that means tempo is just going to like switch in ways that you can't really handle. Like you're going to be overwhelmed. But like for Mordar's specific case, like where he can be like not the attacker or the defender, but the value engine, while your teammate is focusing more on the finer control aspects. Like your teammate is more concerned with bridges, with limiting your opponent's early pushes, so that Mordar sort of gets freed up to focus on this value game plan that he still is really, really good at.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the key points, I would say.
Yeah, that would be the differentiation there with being like attack and defend versus what Mordar does.
In terms of B tier, so I think this is the tier with more masters. I would go like by some. I would say Morelia and Miloween are on B tier here. The support from the golem and what you get from the book is really good. But as we said before, like these are masters that rely on spells. Spells were nerfed. Miloween and Morelia, I think the best point of them, and the reason why they are somewhat weaker in 1v1 but really good in 2v2, is because they feel like support masters. Whatever you want to do, you can probably get support on it with Morelia book. Or if you are trying to do some pushes or pressure, you can very well make better with an Arcane Golem from Miloween behind. Not to mention the second perk spell from Miloween is also very useful for removing key units. So those two right now are B. Before I would say they could be A. Right now, especially after the nerfs on Morelia, I would say they are B. The other B masters, I think APEP is B. The cycling is for sure good. The value you get is very good. But as I mentioned, there are more units on the field and more things going on. In terms of placing the totem, like managing where you can place the totem, you are it will be
very hard.
Very likely that you will not have a chance to place it in the most adequate position due to the spells your opponent has, due to the board pressure they have. So in that sense, I think and then you need to hold it for some precise situations because you cannot afford to wait 30 seconds. Not just a matter of cycling in 15. You need to wait. So APEP is B. Kingpuff, I would say it's also B. You can do a lot with him, as I said before, but there's more going on, so it will be harder to get that value, and you need to factor your teammate plays also. Like it's not just about swapping your units. It's not just about you being the ones getting the buffs. So you can still get a lot of value, and you can pick up one buff, and your teammate units can pick up the other buff, and you can play around that very well, which is amazing. That's why I think it's a B tier. You can do a lot with him, and you have lots of strategies you can go around with him into V2. That's why I would say it's B. It's not A really because of the difficulty it is to play him and get value out of it. Other B tier must, yeah. Go.
Well, something that you keep mentioning is that there's a lot more units. That's the thing that really puts me off when I play in 2v2s. In 1v1, it's a very patient play style where everything is based on what you do. In 2v2, it's a lot more hectic. You can't always wait on things to happen your way. You need to respond faster, and it seems like your higher rank masters are those that can actually respond like that.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because like we were saying, there's more stuff going on. Ratbo, I think it's really B right now along with Velourian because the extra scratch you get here, since you also get scratch from your teammate, you have much more scratch going on. And if your opponents don't actually have that many units that are good versus hordes, those creds will start being annoying, will start stacking, will give you more pressure on bridges. That means more experience going your way. Daka, you have more targets because you might have targets in both players' decks, but it's also more easy to counter because there are two players that can put a unit to stop it. So, like, more targets for Daka, but also easier to stop it. That's why you might be able to play it more as an offensive spell, but also Duck is in that spot right now. But I also don't think there's anything that can be done about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Valorian the same. If there are more units, it's harder to pinpoint where the heals are going to go, where the heals are going to.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you need more units because you want those bridges. That's why you cannot just focus on 3 or 4 units that you can guarantee are going to get the heals, and they are just the units you want to get the heal because that might just not happen. The other two masters I would put into B tier are Ravager and Stormbringer. Marksmanship of Stormbringer is very good, and the global pressure of his basic attacks is also awesome when dealing with control combos, and especially if your opponents don't have that many beefy units. Stormbringer just chips away that damage that will stack up and will be something. And if not all units, because marksmanship now only buffs your units, not your teammate units. But if your units still have higher range, you can still work about that. And like Stormbringer just plays mainly ranged units, and then his teammate plays mainly melee units. So you can work around that and get lots of value. And Ravager, just as Pom was saying, like now you have 2 players, the double amount of mana that you can invest into supporting those Brutus pushes. Like Brutus just is very strong, and then if you can play around that, that's awesome. You can have a huge amount of pressure that no one's expecting, just going into your opponent's side and doing a lot of damage. And then at that point, you have supposedly you manage to have an advantage on experience that you can keep up and hold it. And even if you lose the bit, if you do get that third perk and you just go with it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say Ravage is like the lowest of the B tiers because in a control meta with so many things to distract heavy units, if you don't do anything with your third perk, you're out basically. Because like if your third perk didn't give you the pressure or the experience advantage, you're gonna be out because there's nothing else after it. Like Morelia is similar, but she still has the book. It's like that's why I think she spikes at second perk and then has an explosion on third one. Like spike, you are there. Explosion happens and then it's out. Ravager has an explosion because his second perk doesn't really count as a spike. Yeah, I would say that's how I would put them for B tiers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I sort of did stack up a lot of little details I wanted to add. Yeah, starting with APEP, like the main difference between, like another like marked difference that I wanted to make between 1v1 and 2v2 is the fact that in 1v1 there feels like since there are less interaction, there's much more space for finesse and optimization. Like there's a certain way that you can do things to squeeze that little bit of extra value. 2v2 tends to be predicted a little bit more on raw power output, which is where, things like cycling and shield totem and APEP's main advantages don't really seem to do all that much. Because, like, if you're cycling things just for cycling, it's just really not that powerful because you do really need to put that extra oomph behind everything you do in 2v2, which is why he seems to go a little bit further down on the tier list. Kingpuff, one of the main distinctions to make here is also the fact that his like his little bubbles that give his perks, those are limited to 5. Basically, that's the difference between Kingpuff down here in B and Big Bad Volco up in S. Volco has no limits on how many minions get that rage. If they fit inside that circle, they're in. Like, it doesn't matter if they're 5 or if they're 50. Like, they're all going to get that value. Yeah, Rappo just wanted to comment that, like, this is where you really notice that auto attacks aren't as important, because, like, Rappo's auto attack would be honestly one of his main weaknesses in 1v1. I've heard so many top players talk about this, you know, like, people joking around, like, oh man, like, Rappo's auto attack is keeping his opponent in the game and things like that, because, like, it just really does have that extra value there. Velourian, I personally had him in A tier, because I just really feel that not only the passive healing being able to be applied on more minions is very powerful, but, like, Searing Light in a meta that just seems to be completely overrun with snipers, like, I feel like that just really gives him that extra level of control against, like, must-kill targets.
Yeah, but, like, if you are playing versus 2 opponents, like, one can play the key, right? The Searing Light, and the other plays a horror, like a
It
high
is
unit.
easier to counter, which is why I sort of got, like, turned towards that. Like, personally,
Here, but because of that, like, the heal, you have less control, and the Searing Light less value. That's why it just
easier to counter, I would say. Like, it does have good value, but it's easier to counter if, like, the players are coordinated enough. Stormbringer, I'm pretty sure you guys covered it all. Ravager, it was like one little thing, but no, I think we're good. So I'm guessing 3 and Dionna are the C tier masters.
well, yeah, Rekt and Dionna are the C tiers. You can do a lot with Dionna. As Pom was saying, she benefits from cycling. The thing is, it's harder to get as much value of traps when there's more stuff going on. Like, when you are playing Dionna, you really want to keep control on the match, like, know everything that's going on, and so you are precise with your trap. Like, okay, I will taunt here so that unit can kill my opponent's unit while my opponent is targeting the taunt. Like, in 2v2, you have 2 opponents that can play extra units to destroy the taunt faster than you wanted. There are more players that can spell your traps as well. Since there are more units coming closer to your master tower, it will be harder to get the trap, like the defensive trap, on the unit you want to stop. It's just too much going on to the point, like, for you to be able to get that great sweet spot value from Dionna, I feel.
Yeah, Dionna definitely the biggest victim of the finesse versus power transition that you get from 1v1 to 2v2. Like, she just, like, she does in 1v1 she does very punctual things that end up having, like, very powerful ripple effects, but they're not powerful. They're just very punctual and precise, and just sort of give you constant advantages. In 2v2, where she doesn't really have any inherent power spikes from her perks, she just really just ends up falling behind because she can't contribute that much to a team effort compared to what the other team is going to just pile up and throw at you.
Yeah, it's like similar to Morelia and Miloween. It feels like she's just also a supportive master, but it's much harder for the support she gives to be as much valuable as the supports the other two give.
Yeah, she doesn't have a 1,000 health drag. No, what is it? Is it still 2,000 health?
One little thing also about Dionna. Her perk 2, Ruffles, it's much harder to control where
impossible.
You get your bounty on the bridges when there's 2 people killing stuff all over the place, and it's harder for Ruffles to survive. So both controlling where it drops and actually getting it is much harder.
Yep. I would say the reason she's not D and instead C, it's because, as I was saying, she's still a support master. Like, she feels much more like a support master, and you can get some combos to real benefit from the precise support of those traps. But that's the thing, if you are restricting Dionna to only be viable or at least valuable in certain combos, then she can by no means be a B tier master, and that's like she's not completely unplayable, but you need to play very specific. You need to play some specific cards and combos to that get her to benefit. Wrecked is mainly because we went how the problems of his issue with his perk, especially his third perk in 1v1, that does not change for 2v2. In fact, it becomes worse because again your opponents can play more units to counter and block the wrecked. Since that shot is not even piercing or AoE, like you literally just play a small scrat or something in front, that perk does nothing. And in terms of clones, I think the way I ranked Volco and Mordar go to show how much Rex is a disadvantage, because clones get on the bridge, clones get burned. Clones get on your side, Mordar does one thing, they die. So if these masters that you can get huge amount of value in 2v2 are strong and they counter a Rex gonna be weaker. Like it's how like some things are strong because they are better than other things, and in this case I think that's the balance between Volco mainly, but also Mordar versus Rex.
Yeah, his shadow dance damage output gets incredibly dwarfed. Like it already isn't that spectacular in 1v1, but once you get to 2v2, like that damage output is almost negligible to the point where you can almost ignore it.
I would say the damage is basically the only thing you can do, because at least with the Shadow Dance you can pinpoint where you're getting that explosion. Like, okay, I'm gonna jump here so that there's a clone here on the other side that is gonna instantaneously die and deal that damage.
The clones are basically aggro manipulation in 2v2.
Yeah.
Like you just try to attract targets to it so you can defend other units. I will argue, like I did put him higher in 1v1 a lot because of that. You know, just the skill expression that he has. You know, the way you can manipulate aggro with clones. You can keep some clones like in your back pocket to address situations that arise. But yeah, he still ends up falling by the wayside because of the finesse versus power curve and the fact that his kit doesn't inherently have very many power spikes. Even though his perk 3 can go face, and that does tend to be decisive once in a while, it does, you know, I've had that happen plenty of times where it just ends up running into a scrat and doesn't really do anything. Or just like you switch to where you want to shoot that perk 3 and then something's already in the way by the time you're there. Very, very hard to get just like consistent value from his perks.
Most of the time when you want to aim that, you want to, of course, have a Shadow Dance ready.
Yeah.
You want both Shadow Dance and your perk 3 in your hand already so that there's no lag of the card moving into your hand. So you pre-target your Shadow Dance and then you instantly use Shadow Dance into the blast itself while aiming at the unit, one after the other, extremely fast.
I think that
definitely one of the two things I picked up from watching Palm, if I'm being honest. Like swapping to the very edges so that you target the pocket and doing like swap shoot immediately. I was definitely like Palm was definitely one of the earlier adopters of Rect, and watching the Delta Strike exhibition, which was him, Deadshot, and Zurzo versus Natarajan, Niprax, and Dragon. That was definitely where I learned a lot of, the little bit more advanced techniques of R3. Definitely hope to do more of that in the future.
I did enjoy his playstyle. It's more of like you were playing an RTS rather than the usual Minion Masters.
Yeah, that feels, if it's flashy, it's fun.
Yeah. Flashy is a really good way of putting. That's a good word.
Mm-hmm.
I think this monster can jump everywhere.
Yeah, he just highlight real moments. You know, that's what streamers live for.
Like, if the third perk is not going to be addressed, at least allow them the jump from the Shadow Clone to go a bit further. Like the length where he can jump to be a bit further. That might allow him to be more versatile.
Like the small strip of field where you can actually put another clone on, like make it maybe a little wider, you're thinking?
Exactly.
wider piercing, maybe multi-hit. Maybe it could be 5 hits of 50 that may pierce if they kill the unit.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
That
Yeah.
would be some serious 4D just to use that. Like
Yeah. I think
calculate it. Like you'd have to know
strong.
just so much more than like the total HP of a minion. Suddenly you would be able to like start like lining up 2 or 3 minions and calculating if it goes through all of them. That would be
I
some
love that.
very advanced stuff that isn't necessarily like mechanically demanding. It's still easy to do, but you have to know what's going to happen.
That would add to his playstyle, which is centered around actually controlling a minion, because throughout our years of playing, we've never actually controlled the minions on the field. We only plug them down. But Rect is much different.
Yeah, like I said, the aggro manipulation element, especially like of the shadow clones, that you can like they pop and do 50 like any other illusory minion. So you put a clone in the middle of a skeleton horde and it explodes, and you can draw the attacks of like big heavy minions like cleavers and golems and things like that don't necessarily have the most impressive attack speed, and suddenly you're in a much better position to like manipulate the flow of a minion fight.
Yeah, the concept of illusions used to be pretty prevalent a few years back, where the illusory cleaver only cost 1 mana. It was like a 1 mana spell that deals 50 damage, and now it's nice to see it return with Rect.
Yeah, it was incredibly powerful. I can't count the amount of times I remember seeing an illusory cleaver pop an entire enraged propeller horde. Good times.
Exactly.
Good times.
Those were very cool. No, I think that's a good solution for Rect. Like piercing should clearly be avoided because that would be very strong. But that idea, like,
yeah, the multi-hit that spreads the damage over every hit, that's definitely something interesting that they could look into. I'm pretty sure we're all set for this tier list, right? We can go ahead and save that. Anything else you guys want to comment on?
No,
Okay,
it seems to be all.
so save it. So minion masters.
We've detailed tier lists where we ranked each master within each tier. So for a bit more fine tuning of the power levels.
yeah. I mean, like clearly, I put lots of masters in B tier, and clearly they are like not all exactly the same level. And I think that's something important to keep in mind. But in general, I think that's the good way of putting. Like
Yeah, but
masters that are
always
yeah,
the
are balanced. Like B stands for balance. That's how I like to go about it. And it's fine if there are some that are a bit stronger, some that are a bit weaker, but
yeah, you definitely like to see something approximately close to this as far as the distribution of masters on the tier list. You know, if we could tone Volco down to A or B, that would probably be like the only thing as far as 2v2 that I'd like to see. Like maybe like go Kingpuff with it and just limit the amount of minions that can get that the rage effects. That would be honestly such a simple change that would like reel him in just so much and make you have to like punctually decide like which minion is like worthy of the Volco rage effect, so that you can get the most value out of it, and just instead of just throw a skeleton horde that immediately leaks onto the bridge and pops rage onto everything.
Yep.
It's interesting to see that in 2v2 most masters have been ranked in a B. That's mainly because of the idea behind the game modes. In 2v2 you have of course more actors, so they all complement each other's weaknesses and strengths. In 1v1 it's more polarized. You only have one choice of deck, one choice of master. That's why mine is a bit more spread out.
I think it makes sense considering how the game works.
Yeah, it's just the weight of decisions in 1v1 has like so many more repercussions. Like every mistake in 1v1 is to some degree magnified by the fact that you simply have less actions overall, and you need to make them count.
You've got no backup. You don't have a buddy watching you.
No excuses, just get in there.
Everything's your fault.
Mainly that everything is your fault, but every win is your win. Nobody gets carried in 1v1 except by their master.
It's cooler to say it's our win. It's our win. We achieved it together. But fine, you guys take your win. I'll take.
Yeah, the social aspect is definitely one of the more attractive things of 2v2. Like, personally, I haven't played that many pre-mades recently, but yeah, the fact of being like on comms with a teammate and being able to like coordinate things, you know, like what was one that I really liked? Yeah, it was like a Harbinger back when Pincer did 170 damage, but you know, I would always like see that Harbinger and my teammate would have his 4-mana fireball ready and I'd have the Pincer and we just 1-2 it, just go. And then, like, I do half the damage, you do half the damage. It's an even trade, and we take a huge threat off the board. Like, things like that are definitely a good feeling in 2v2 matches. Oh, Palm, I heard you were saying something there in the back. Sorry if I cut you off.
I do enjoy those spell combos when you line up. There's spell combos, and there's also when your friend is, like, hovering Plasma Marines waiting on you to drop a tank, for example, then you plop your Elite Swarmer, then he plops instantly his Plasma Marines. Those kinds of interactions where both players do those precise plays is very enjoyable.
Yeah, like one player provides like the tank and the protection spell, and the other guy provides the DPS, and combinations like that where like you don't have to like line up your cycle perfectly to provide everything. You just have to do like enough for every push.
Which is great when you find that one teammate that you connect mentally with and you know exactly the kind of play that you do. So that
you think about me, Pom. Thank you.
You hover over your unit, then your teammate knows what you want to do, and then you wait for the perfect moment and do it, and it works well.
Yeah, that's super fun too. Like, I actually had it happen with a random's teammate, which was the weirdest thing. Like, he was a Kingpuff, and I saw that he was hovering his swap, and I saw a good opportunity to swap, so I just clicked on my DPS unit and put it on the bridge opposite to what he was going to swap. Like, do it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll take care of it. Just do the swap. I'll kill it.
More people need to communicate by
it
hovering.
Just immediately did it, and it was amazing, and like we won that game free. Like, it's just those little moments that you remember. Go ahead.
There's a lot more room for communication within teammates. Most people demonize their teammate and hate them and hate everything they do. But it starts with communicating by hovering your units. That exposes your intent to your teammate so that they can observe it. It's not most people play the game as a 1v2 with a random teammate being there, plopping down units.
Yeah, like just doing stuff like, oh, whatever. Yeah.
But hovering is the key to communication.
Yeah, and randos, you do get kind of accustomed to that, and honestly, like, even your deck building changes because, like, suddenly, like, you tend to make, like, more generalist decks in randos because you have to be, like, basically you have to be able to do everything. You have to drag your teammate. You have to be able in more situations than you would honestly like to. You have to be able to just grab your opponent by the back of the neck and drag them screaming over the finish line. Because it's just, like, it tends to happen. Like, you know, it's not like a trade secret or anything that some of the players that play randos instead of pre-mades, it's because, you know, they don't really have friends that play the game. So they play with, you know, whoever's available.
That's why I hope when more players are here that will go away. Like, it's easier to grab your friend and then you and your friend stick around. That's 2 instead of 0. It's much better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My strategy for random 2v2s is to pretty much ignore what my teammate does. I know that my teammate will always try to answer the threat, so I always let enemy minions reach our master tower, then I deal with the bridges or pocket. I never fight enemy minions. It's much more about passive control, let your teammate do whatever.
Yeah, I try to add like the extra element of ping communication where I can. I know a lot of people get annoyed by that, but you know, when they do something right, or you know, especially when like I put down a ping that's like attack or don't or something like that, and they actually heed to it, like I'll always give that a thumbs up, because nobody actually does that. Like mostly they do something wrong, you put the X ping, and then they just angry face emote you, and more often than not they just quit and leave you there hanging. But yeah, it's a challenge, but it's like somewhat of an interesting challenge. You know, it's like that human psychology of reacting to a challenge. You know, kind of in the way that people still play a curse these days, because the deck in itself is a challenge. You know, survive till your big dragon, and people just like by absolute like inherent human nature look at that and go, "Hey, I can survive. I can do that." And even though like I rag on that whole archetype because of its many problems, but you know, some people just like react to the challenge and they want that big dragon more than anything.
I do like the Keratin of Stick of Ascension.
Yep. Okay, so that should probably bring us to our closing thoughts. Any shout outs you guys want to give to any communities, any, like, I don't know, social media accounts or content that you guys want to shout out?
I don't have any at the moment.
No, I mean, just the whole community in general. I think like being part of these events and talking about Minion Masters is something that if we get to enjoy the game and enjoy hanging out in the community would probably make no sense. I'm talking about me, but I think Pom would also agree with this part. Like, if you are not involved in the community and you don't enjoy the game, then it's kind of pointless to just share and enjoy it.
Well, my final closing message would be to be respectful of each other, discuss, and communicate.
Yeah,
it's a good one to put in there. Like I will have my gripes about the community because I'm just that kind of guy that like I'm an optimizer by instinct, so I'll always be able to find the problem, even if it's not something I decide to focus on. But one thing I definitely will say about this community, like, it's like the friendly aspect of it, I really do not put that in doubt at all. There's definitely plenty of people that, you know, you can just easily approach. Like, I know I've done like several of these like ideas. I did the Delta Strike exhibition. This is our third state of the game, and like in most cases, like I never had any actual contact with any of the people. Like Fogo, this is my first time like interacting with you at all. I knew you only by name before that. I knew you tended to team up with Satan Worship, which was the guy we had on the last edition. Palm, I met you when we did Delta Strike because you were one of the, like, ideally we wanted it to be like Americas versus EU. So, you know, my first contact with you was inviting you to the Delta Strike exhibition. But yeah, plenty of friendly people if you're, you know, willing to reach out. So shout outs to that. I will go ahead and give out a shout out to Palm because he also streams on Twitch, not like extremely regularly or anything, but you know, aside from his YouTube, he also has his Twitch channel, Bomodoro-san. I hope I pronounced that right. And yeah, anything else before we shut it down for now, guys? That's going to be it. Thank you to Palm and DFogoX for joining me, and that has been State of the Game number 3. Anything you guys want to add to this discussion, be sure to add that to the comments below or on my Discord. I'll be sure to include the link. Share your tier list. The template is going to be in the comments. And let's just honestly get this discussion rolling, because if there's any reason I do this, it's because I love talking in depth about the games I play with people. So let's get that discussion going, and I will see you guys next time. Hopefully this will be a bit more of a regular thing on YouTube, since I haven't been really too regular with that type of content. But hopefully we can add that, and hopefully we can get back to streaming. I will detail that in just a moment on this video. Thank you guys, and see you next time. Hey guys, Red Shade here. I know that I haven't really been streaming lately at all, and I wanted to give you guys a little insight into that. Basically, long story short, my GPU actually went out. Yeah, one of its memory units just completely collapsed. It was giving me a lot of restart errors and like actually visible problems with my display. So I've had to go ahead and get a new one. For those of you who aren't really looking at the market right now, that does mean really hefty investment. Most of them are like double the price, if not more. So that's definitely something that I've been saving up for. The way to help me with that, though, there's actually plenty of ways here. If you guys go over to my link tree, I'll be sure to add the link below. You guys can find all sorts of useful links here. You can find direct access to that Twitch channel, social media, Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and also a very neat integration here straight to the merch store. You know, as you see there, over 290 products, huge assortment. You guys can definitely take a look at that. Best bang for your buck way for you guys to support my content and get some high quality merch in return. You know, it's not going to be just that straight up throwing money at me. You know, you're gonna get something pretty sweet back, and I'm always looking for new designs, new products, new things to add and offer you guys. And there's even the option to support directly if you guys were so inclined, but the big ones are definitely going to be the Twitch integration and the merch store, so be sure to check that out. Definitely give it a look. I'll promise you it's worth your time. And that's probably going to be it for now. Stay awesome, guys, and I hope to see you next time.